This is the Mooks and the Gripes podcast. I am Trevor, provided that Paul.
I love it.
Paul, I'd never do this without you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. Nope. I'm glad you got another one in the ready to go, you know?
Well, I finally did what I said I was going to do and got a list.
Oh.
Doesn't mean I'll always look at it or be prepared, but
Right.
I at least got that step I've been meaning to do for, since April. So
Yeah, I was going to say like 16, 17 episodes in, we got it down to a science.
Yes. Yep. Well, here we are. We're recording this a little bit earlier, but I know when this is going to go live. I hope you have had a Merry Christmas and you're looking forward to a Happy New Year and celebrating the New Year coming up tomorrow night, December 31st. Always a fun time of year for me. I like the holidays season between Christmas and New Year's just because it feels so reflective in a way. And anticipatory of the new year. It can be a little dreadful sometimes when I don't want what's coming in the new year.
Right.
But I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the new year. This is our first new year where we're starting out with the podcast from the get-go. And I'm looking forward to where we go with this. I'm looking forward to hearing more from listeners, thanks so much for your emails. They're the ones that come in just kind of randomly from people, even on old topics that you even say things like, we know that you guys aren't talking about this anymore. I came to this episode a little bit late, but here's this. I appreciate that. And I do plan to share some of those as we go through all of this. You're always welcome. We love to hear from you and love to respond. And I'm just excited for the new year. I'm sure there'll be some of you that we're going to meet in 2022 that will become good friends. I'm excited about that.
I am too. And I'm picturing some of you out there listening to this episode, maybe while you're digging through your piles of new books, hopefully, and, starting to think about what you're going to read next. So hopefully everybody had some nice time with family and got lots of good bookish presents and lots of good food.
Yeah, we'd talk about that specifically. Like I'd ask you, hey, Paul, did you get any new books for Christmas? But we don't know yet.
I know. We still are looking ahead and looking forward to it. But yeah, I do love that part of it. It's so much fun to just see, sometimes it's a gift card or a gift certificate, or sometimes it's actual physical books or subscriptions, all kinds of fun bookish things to look at.
Did you put any particular books on your Christmas wish list?
It's funny, I have this Amazon wish list that I've had for like a decade, and it's just kind of I put things there so I don't forget them, basically for my own good. But then I'll send it around to family, like, if you're ever looking for ideas, I try to mark them by priority. And then, of course, I always encourage them, look here, but maybe get it from an independent bookstore or something like that. I definitely put that in their ear. But yeah, so I kind of have a working list. And yeah, at top of my list, one that I'm actually going to talk about later today is the books of Jacob, the Fitzgeraldo, the new, from Olga Tokarczuk. I'm always bad at saying her name. That one's very, very high on my list. And then the new Hernan Diaz, who wrote In the Distance, that's coming out. So yeah, there's some new ones that are coming out that are high on my list. And then, of course, as always, I have a huge amount of backlist. I mean, I think by now on that list, there's probably, I don't even know, 200, 250 books that have just been, some of them I probably should take down because they're from like 10 years ago that I put them on there. But yeah, it's kind of fun because every once in a while, my wife will look through for a birthday or Christmas on that list. And she won't look at the very top, the bright and shiny. She'll dig down and try to find something. And so I'll end up getting a book that I put on there maybe 7 years ago. And so it's kind of fun.
That is kind of fun.
Yeah. How about you, though? What are you?
Well, really quick, did you, with the books of Jacob, did you send your wife on the big project, which was to get that special limited, like unbound box that's kind of expensive and she'd have to have it shipped somewhere in the UK and get it here? Is that the one you asked for, or did you just ask for it?
I think I just asked for the standard regular. I did see that and I was tempted to try it, but yeah, that was the one that, like you said, it doesn't ship directly to the US, I believe. So yeah, now I figured this time of year she has a new job and all the craziness of shopping, I better not, that seemed like a little much. But I would love to see that one someday.
So with that book, I'm going to stick with, I love Fitzgeraldo, but it's coming out here in the US pretty soon.
I know.
I'm gonna be patient and just wait for
Hmm.
that to hit.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
heard that there are some advantages to the U.S. version or the non-Fitzgeraldo version because I believe there's some images or photographs in there that
okay.
maybe aren't included in the Fitzgeraldo. So yeah, we'll have to compare notes once, assuming I'm assuming that once we get all of our various editions in, see
Well, I
which
think
ones.
it's Riverhead. Riverhead does good work with their books, so I am excited one way or the other for the book itself, one way or the other. But my apologies. You asked me what is on my Christmas wish list, and I may have told you. I can't remember if I did it on the podcast or if I did it offline or if I even did. But I finally went through the NYRB Classics backlist from about a decade ago. Books that I never bought when I first started reading NYRB Classics. So maybe even about more like 15 years ago. 2008, I think, was the first time that I started reading NYRB Classics and kind of collecting them. So there were a lot of books from that era that I've been wanting to own, but I just, they're on my Christmas wish list for a decade, like yours.
Mm-hmm.
I finally prioritized some of those, and I'm looking forward to seeing which ones I might get, if any. But I think my wife will.
Yeah, she
She
knows you
takes
by
care
now.
of me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
great. That's a really good idea. And I like that idea of looking back because sometimes it's so easy to always look at the new stuff, the new stuff,
mhm.
the new stuff. And yeah, that's a really good idea.
Well, and one that I know she got me is Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker, and that's because I ordered it from the Harvard bookstore sale for her to give to me.
Nice.
So there was that one. One was L.P. Hartley's Eustace and Hilda. I can't remember some of the other ones. They're big. Some of them are really big booked. Eustace and Hilda, for example, is a chunker. I
Hmm.
think it's 3 in 1. But really excited about that. Finally, fill in some of those old gaps that I just haven't gotten. So
Yeah, I
I'll
love that
let you
idea.
know. I'll let you know whether I did or not.
Sounds good. Well, I have my fingers crossed for you.
I appreciate it. So we're going to be talking today about looking ahead, about our 2022 reading resolutions. Um, but first, have you been reading anything you'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, I have. So I'm going to start to sound like a broken record here, but I'm still making my way through Don Quixote
Mm-hmm.
slowly but surely. Actually, not that slowly. It's been very fun and relatively easy. It's kind of a page turner, as I think I might have mentioned before. It's broken up into fairly small little sections, and each one is a different funny conversation or adventure. So I'm finding it actually pretty propulsive. I've already started onto the second half, book two. So I had kind of talked about it for holiday reading plans, and it'll work out nicely because I think at this rate, I might even finish it here in the middle of December or something. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've really been enjoying that. And then in the meantime, as I've talked about, I tend to also do like an audiobook during my commutes or doing the dishes or things like that. And I've been listening to The Visiting Privilege, New and Collected
Hmm.
Stories by Joy Williams. So, this is the first time I've ever read anything by her, actually. For some reason, I'd always had her pegged, and I think it's the book covers that have come out in the past. I
Mm-hmm.
had her pegged as just not my thing, and I don't know exactly what that means. I think maybe I thought it was a little fluffy or more of an airport novel or something like that. Just
Oh,
again, mostly
holy
based.
cow!
I know shows how little I knew, but again, based I think mostly on the covers. They just covers. You don't want to judge the book by the cover, but there's the truth of that statement, and sometimes you end up going in the very wrong direction, and that's what happened here. So anyway, I think a lot of the buzz around her new book, The Changeling, that I had seen from people this year kind of changed my mind and made me realize, wait, I think this is not what I thought it was. And so I just decided to give her a try, and I'm really glad that I did. So yeah, these stories, this is a collection, and mostly it's older stories with a few new stories at the very end. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in these stories. It sounds like maybe you're familiar with her work, but
Yes, yeah,
yeah.
I've liked it for a long time,
Hmm.
and I'm exceptionally curious about how they play in audio.
Yeah, this has a number of different readers. I'll
Hmm.
look it up here in a second. I don't remember who all they are, but it has probably 4 or 5 different readers, some women, and then Richard Powers is one of the readers
Hmm.
actually. And yeah, I would say that they play really well. Um, listening to short stories is always interesting because there's so much nuance and oddity, especially in hers,
Yeah.
that I think sometimes I don't think I'm getting the full experience. And so I do think, luckily, I see her on a lot of the used bookstore shelves, and that's where I've written her off in the past. And so I think what I'm going to do is finish listening to this, but certainly pick it up and go back through and revisit some of these where I can give them a little bit of a closer reading. But yeah, I mean, I saw in Vogue they had said, characters in her fiction seek out the signs and symbols the world broadcasts, but often, as we all do, misinterpret them or escape them entirely, leaving them for the reader to witness. And I thought that was a really good description because, I saw in several of people's descriptions of her saying memorably unclassifiable fiction. And I feel like that's, as I was trying to think of how to describe her or talk about her, that sounds about right to me. Like I have a hard time really putting my finger on exactly what she does. And maybe you'd be better at it than I would, but I don't know. It's just really compelling. Some of the lines and the characters in here are just stunning too. Like she is so good at that. What we've talked about with short stories where you capture this one moment in time. And I don't know. Like I said, I don't feel like I'm saying a whole lot that is super
Well,
intelligible here, but she's just amazing.
it's odd. She has stories that pop up in the New Yorker every once in a while, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm always really excited because you simply don't know what you're going to get, other
Mm-hmm.
than it'll probably bend your mind a little bit and make you confused.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the commenters on my site really like it, and others just write it off as a waste of time. I
Mm-hmm.
certainly don't feel like it's a waste of time. It's almost like she is Barbara Cummins leaning really into the bizarre, but
Yeah.
with this twinge of familiarity that makes it also very uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
in the way that it just gets at this these familiar relationships or familiar people. um I don't know, it's like having a bug under your skin sometimes.
Ooh,
it,
I
it
like
just
that.
I don't know, it's
Yeah.
they're but I find them exceptionally dense as well. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I was curious about listening to them. I'm not sure if I'd be I would like to try that, especially maybe with the book open.
That's what I would recommend. Yeah. I think I've said sometimes with audio, what I tend to do is try it for new authors that I'm not sure what to
Hmm.
expect rather than going out and buying the book or maybe somebody who I don't think I would get to otherwise. And so yeah, that's kind of was the case here. But then in a case like this where it really resonates, that's when I'll go back and follow up more closely. And I like that idea. I think this would be a perfect one to do that thing we've talked about where you listen to the audiobook while you read. But yeah, I will say that the production value and the readings themselves by these authors are excellent. So
Nice.
I would encourage people to give that a try. But yeah, I think you did a great job describing her. You didn't even know what I was going to say, and I think you did a better job. So yeah, nice.
Well, I've been trying for a long time because I have written about her
Mm-hmm.
um, probably half a dozen times over the years, and so yeah, I've been cheating a little bit.
Well, what is interesting about her is I tend to have an aversion to like a quirky character, or at least I'm
Yeah,
very wary of that. And a lot of the characters in her books could be described in that way, but somehow she manages to not only pull it off, but make it really excellent. Um, just writing as little kids or like, weird adults or people that are on the outside, but like I don't know. I don't know about you, but quirky for me can go wrong really quickly to the
yeah.
point where it just really irritates me and gets on my nerves. It's one of my biggest. If we ever do a pet peeves episode, that would be high on my list. But somehow, I don't know exactly what it is that she does different, but she can pull it off.
Well, and you're probably right. That's another thing that sounds, and I can't remember specifically, but sounds like a turnoff for some people on the blog when they're talking about her work and their experience reading her story. That and ending it without really knowing what even happened.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two things. But I agree with you. I think her quirkiness pays off.
Yeah, I do too.
It,
And
it fits. It fits. It's not just for the sake of being a weird voice or whatever.
no, definitely not. And as far as leaving it unfinished, that's actually one of my favorite things about them. I really love that about her, and I like that she is kind of unapologetically not dark, but bordering on dark. You know, she doesn't try to wrap it up with a neat bow or make you feel better at the end. I mean, sometimes there are some where there's some hope or some optimism, but there's some where I wouldn't say there is, and that's kind of refreshing to me sometimes, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
How about you? What are you reading these days?
Well, I'm not very far yet, but I did start with the whole listening and reading experience with David Copperfield. And so there we go. But I just started it. Just started it. So I don't even know how I feel yet, other than it's super pleasant just to get into that. And I'm listening to a version that a lot of people have recommended. It's Richard Armitage, performed by Richard Armitage, and just really, really, really enjoying it. I mean, I'll have more to say on it hopefully soon. Yeah. Or, because we're recording these a little out of order, maybe I've already said it to listeners in the last episode, but I'm excited about it. So that's the one that I just started, but I'm also right in the middle. And I told you this a little bit ago. I'm in the middle of Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson. I'm in the second book there and really enjoying it, though I haven't had a chance to read it as much this past week because of COVID booster and not feeling very well and busyness with family and, holidays all over the place, which is its own type of joy, but it has made it so that I'm missing out on some of the reading time. But I wouldn't give it up. For example, last night, my wife and I, after the kids went to bed, which we rarely do, went down and played Mario Party with each other.
Oh, nice. That sounds like
and it
fun.
was so much fun. It's something we used to do back when we were dating or, just married, and it was just the two of us. But we've been so tired for a decade or so that we don't really do that. But it was so much fun. And so I wouldn't have changed that to be like, oh, I wish I could have read another, 20, 30 pages of Shadows of Self is the name of the Mistborn book I'm reading. But it's just that trade-off. Sometimes a good thing, and sometimes you're trading it off for things that you'd rather not be doing. But that's where my head has been. So thank goodness for these that I can kind of dip into audio-wise as well when I'm doing the dishes or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
That's what I'm doing. Yeah, we need to start doing this in the other order. I always feel like I'm talking about things we've already talked about, and they're not as unique and interesting as yours. But I guess maybe we start with yours to really, pull our listeners in.
No, they are just waiting. They're here for the Mario content. Like they're just trying to Don Quixote, whatever. You've been talking about that for a month now.
2022, we're changing the podcast. It's now a Mario podcast. My sons would be thrilled. They would listen at that point.
Yeah, we would boost our readership by at least 4.
Yeah, I wonder if we'd be like the Out of Step dads podcasting about it for the youth, or maybe even the grandparents. I don't know.
I think so.
I
don't think it would probably go in the way that we intended it to go.
Wouldn't really work that long, I don't think.
No, probably not.
But, all right, well, let's do what we probably have been born and bred to do. Let's talk about books.
Exactly, our comfort zone.
So we're calling this our 2022 reading resolutions. That word has a lot of weight. And I'm very curious, Paul, whether you make resolutions, whether you think this is a good thing or a negative thing, whether you make a particular kind of resolution if you do. So let's start there. Do you yearly make reading resolutions?
I do, but I think probably a very loose definition of that word. As you've probably seen from, talking to me over the years, like I'll usually have some books on my radar, down the road, like Don Quixote or somebody like that, like 9 months ago, I was already kind of thinking about that. And so I certainly am always thinking ahead and kind of scanning my bookshelf. And sometimes I'll pull things out and put them in little piles. But at the same time, I definitely am not one of those people who have a list of an order, or because I like the serendipity of especially, like with Twitter and everything, there's always these books that are coming onto your radar that you've never even heard of, or maybe you just are not in the mood, or you look over your shelf and one catches your eye. So I would say that I definitely have kind of general resolutions.
Yeah.
And I can talk a little bit more in detail about what I mean by that. But I think, yeah, not anything that's real prescriptive for sure. How about you?
Um, Probably the same. I don't know if I've ever been really good at resolutions of any type
Right.
around the New Year's. And reading probably is the thing that made me realize, man, why do I even do this?
Mm-hmm.
A week later, I am on to something else. I don't even care about these, books that I was so excited to start, or at least something else has come up and taken precedence. So I realized, after years of doing this and publishing it on the blog or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and then looking back on it a year later when I'm writing my next one and thinking, I didn't do any of those. I didn't touch those.
Right.
What am I doing this for? What's the point of a resolution if you don't even keep it for beyond the day it took you to think about it? And then I realized, I think that's part of what I like about it for me personally. I love the act of reflecting on the past year and of making plans, but not plans that become hurdles or definitive. I'm with you for sure on the having the flexibility, because I mean, frankly, what does wistful Christmas hungover me
Mm-hmm.
know about what I'll be going through and what I'll need to read in May or
Right.
August or whenever? And so I don't like, I never, later on I'm like, man, I was such an idiot. Who was that guy, who set this up for me? I'm not going to do that.
All right.
And I still do it though. And I've tried to be a little more I've tried to be a little better at going through them, because I have enjoyed accomplishing some of them. That brings a sense of joy. And I think I've told you before, I've admired that you do get to these things. You set a goal and it's particular, and it's not super lofty, that like it's not like you said, I'm going to read Don Quixote and every other early Spanish book. You know,
Right.
I'm going to read Don Quixote and, these 30 other books this year that are all related to it, because you have a good way of looking at these things. And so I have been better at sticking to some of these goals, but also trying to get out of it. But I still think doing these resolutions is important to me personally, and I'll get into that in just a second. Why do I think that? You asked me a little bit, and I want to turn it back to you for a second to get your thoughts on what you said there a second ago. You can go into a little bit more detail about your resolutions and why you
Yeah.
do them.
Yeah. So I think the reason I do them, like you said, is somewhat just that idea of looking ahead, but it kind of sparks that joy that we talk about so
Hmm.
much with. It's
Good
just,
way of putting it.
yeah, it's almost like, some of the joy you get when you're looking through the NYRB catalog at new and upcoming things. I mean, a lot of us I know who, both of us talking right now, and then a lot of our listeners I know have shelves and shelves of books. And just by the nature of what it is, we probably have not read a good chunk of those. And so to me, it is almost like a free shopping trip where you're just like having fun. I mean, it's just looking through all these, gives you a chance to kind of go through and get some of the dust off a few of those that you haven't looked at in a while and pull them out.
Hmm.
Like, I need to get to that one or something like that. And yeah, so I think that's a lot of it for me, is just revisiting your old friends. Maybe you're going to reread some books, and maybe there's one that you bought it.
Hmm.
I have some books that I know, like when Borders went out, whatever that was, 10 years ago, they had a 50% off sale, and I've had them on my shelves that I picked them up at that time, and I've just never gotten to them. So it's like, I don't know, it's just that nice balance of looking back on some of those. Like, why have I not gotten to that? Maybe that'll be a good one for this year. But again, for me, it's not, if I make it into an assignment, or like you were saying with Don Quixote, if I tried to, I do not tend to turn it into a project, like where I'm going to not only study Don Quixote, but all these other texts that were around him at the time. Like, not to say I wouldn't want to do that sometime, but generally for me, I do tend to pick, like, here's some different ideas that I would like to explore this year, vague, and then kind of work from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious about the types of goals you've set, or resolutions or intentions. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
Simon Savage on The Readers several years ago who had the same affliction that I do, of getting a great idea, telling everybody about it, and then getting another great idea and never doing the other one.
Right.
Um, and he finally said it. These are reading intentions. These are the things I intend right now, but I don't want to be locked into a resolution like I have resolved to do this thing and then feeling like a failure later on when I don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, that process made me step back and try to think, why do I do this then? And I think you say it really well with it's the thing that brings up the joy. It's the anticipation. It's the hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's an injection of hope in a project like this, of sitting down and making a thoughts about what's coming up in the future. You might not accomplish those particular things, but the hope is real, and the excitement that can inspire, and hopefully some of the experiences will still accomplish the same thing. So, for example, when I look at my reading intentions for the year, I might not accomplish any of these things that we're about to talk about, but I do know that I'm more deliberate in my reading when I do this, and that I'm more deliberate in separating the time, and maybe sitting down at the evening with a hot drink and my wife to read a book on the
Mm-hmm.
couch, or in the summertime going out on the porch in our rocking chairs and reading for a couple of hours as the sun sets, or going out by the fire to read some short stories in the late spring, when it's still cold outside. Those are reading things that I love to do, and when I'm looking forward, I kind of picture them
Mm-hmm.
as I'm looking at these books, and it becomes it gives me a sense of well-being that I might lack otherwise in years when I haven't done this, or years when I know I'm not reading deliberately. We've talked about this before, but reading is something that's very important for my mental health and well-being, particularly in the winter months. I'm not going to give up the resolutions because, again, I need that hope,
Yeah.
and that desire to carve out that time and read by candlelight, at my desk.
Mm-hmm.
And even when things are busy and going on, that can be healing and help me through it. So that's why I still do it, and why, if I don't do it, I actually do start missing out on those particular experiences. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I really like that. It's almost in some ways like a commitment to something that you love, where it's,
mhm.
I don't want to say like renewing your vows, but maybe a little bit of that whole idea of
Yeah.
just, it's acknowledging this is an important part of my life. It's fun to plan
Mhm.
about. It's important enough that I want to think about it. Yeah, I really like that idea of it. And yeah, I
So
think
I
it's
don't
interesting.
take it as seriously as my, fidelity to my wife and all that, but
Exactly. Not saying it's the same thing. Yeah. No, I like that idea. And then I don't know, too, I think there's something like to be said for just kind of these ongoing things. Like if you're just thinking about it all the time, like we do, one that comes to mind for me is Jenny Colvin on Reading Envy. I
Mhm.
think we've mentioned her a couple times. I know that she has kind of an ongoing project, and I believe she's been doing it for years, where she's just kind of reading her way around the world. And I was trying to look up the details. I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe she's trying to read at least one book from every country in the world. And I know that just from having listened to her podcast for so many years, this has not been, I'm going to do this in 1 year, or I'm going to do this by this date. It's just kind of a fun, ongoing project that she's doing. And I think just for different people, there are different things like that just kind of
Mhm.
keep you going. And, there might be 6 months where you don't even touch a book from that project. But when you
Yeah.
want to return to it, it's there waiting for you. And I think there's a lot of value and fun in that too.
Yeah, one of mine that I made last year for 2021 was my list of betterment, which I've talked
Yeah.
about several times, and that's very much an ongoing, potentially, up until I die,
Mm-hmm.
project of these 50 books. I've been doing pretty good at getting through them. Um, I should be able to keep on going, and maybe even make another one someday. But that has been awesome. But it could become its own trap,
Mm-hmm.
where I feel like those are the only books that I can read, and start to feel that resentment to a list, to a project, or to a past self who didn't know what was good for him.
Yeah, exactly.
But it hasn't become that at all, because I've got that flexibility, and I figured out a way to make it work while still enjoying the moment too.
That reminds me when you posted all that, probably around this time last year, or
Mm-hmm. Yep, it
um,
was.
I know that you had tweeted out some things asking for people for their ideas. And I think there was both a general list of betterment, but also an NYRB specific list of betterment. I need to revisit because I know I responded to both of those posts, and I don't know that I've actually really been paying much attention to that, but I'd be curious if some of those lodged in my brain and if I've read any of them over the past year. So I might have to go do that. Maybe I'll let you know how that goes. But I love that list of betterment idea.
There's something about writing it down. I've found that even on our podcast, when I go back and edit these, I'm like, oh, I intended to read that. I'm glad I did that. Talking about it doesn't quite do the same as writing it down and publishing it
No,
to make it stick. So I'd be curious too if any of them stuck for you. Not that it makes it different or better, but my memory does not serve me very well for things that I've just, if someone says something on Twitter, I may say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that too. And then I didn't even think about it again. Like that is the moment and it is gone.
Exactly.
But I will put these lists up on bookshop.org, or at least somewhat, and kind of refer to them in our blog post. But yeah, you might have to revisit this every few months to make sure you're remembering why you set these things up and whether you still want to do them or not. But I'm very curious. Do you have anything else you want to kind of go over when it comes to reading resolutions? It sounds like you do them and you like them, and you do a pretty good job of following them. I'm excited. I'm assuming that yours might be like mine, where there may be a mix of a specific book you want to read, a mix of more general thematic things you want to do, or general author or topic or something like that. So I'm excited to get into this. Yeah, what's your first one you want to share?
Okay, well, I spoiled this one a little bit in our last episode, and we talked about it, so I won't touch on it too much. But just the Shakespeare project is definitely something that I'm really excited about it. I can't say from the last time that we talked about it that I've really gotten any further with details on it. But again, that's kind of how I do these resolutions. My goal is something to do with reading a lot of Shakespeare, and I have yet to work out the details. But I think what I'm going to do is just kind of maybe crowdsource a little bit, or just look around on the internet and figure out what are some ways that people have done this in the past that they found really fulfilling. Is there a certain order? Should I just dip in and out? Do I need to go in any kind of historical order or just whatever? But more than anything, it's just to get back in and have fun and revisit Shakespeare. It's just, I don't need to say much more about it, but he comes up all the time as a reader, whether it's an allusion to him or a direct reference or whatever. And it's just one of those where it's always like, oh, I need to get to that. Oh, I need to get to that. And I think this is the year where I'm going to start to make it happen. And then this may, spread out over a number of years for all I know, but more than anything, just kind of get started and see where it goes.
Nice. And I don't know if you saw, but we did get a DM this morning from our good friend Ben on Twitter. Did you get a chance to see that?
I did see that, yeah.
Well, let's look at it just really quick. It's just very short. He says, I enjoyed the holiday reading episode, gents. Paul mentioned taking on Shakespeare as a reading project. So there you go. I can't recall whether you have done a reading projects episode. I don't know if this will count.
I was wondering that too.
Maybe partially. That would be a great topic. I tend to do that myself with varying degrees of success, and I'd love to know your history with them. So we will get back with you on that, Ben. In fact, it looks like he's writing another DM right now as I'm saying this. I see his little dot. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think people will be interested in your Shakespeare project, whether you do it, how you choose to do it, whether it does yield the fruit that you're looking for. I know I am, because I'm halfway tempted to not to direct or make you like change or even consider certain things, but as you put it out there, I may want to jump in and just be like a side reader, like any listener might be out there, oh, I'm going to do that a little bit too and see how my experience lines up with Paul. Because it's been a while since I've really dug into Shakespeare, over the last few years. It's probably been a couple of years since I read one of his plays, and would like to do that. And, it'd be kind of fun. I don't know if this is possible, but down in Cedar City here in Utah, which for you is just a trip down the interstate. And for me, it's a trip down the interstate to meet up down in southern Utah. They have a Shakespeare festival.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And it'd be kind of fun to someday, maybe not in 2022, but maybe someday catch a Shakespeare.
Ooh, yeah.
Spend a couple of days doing a Mooks podcast get together at the Shakespeare Fest down in Cedar City.
I love that idea. That would be great. Yeah, and I would welcome you to join in however much you want to. And anybody who's out there, if that sounds appealing to you, first of all, feel free to send me if you've had some success. If you had any kind of a project like this where you've found a certain order that really worked for you. I mean, I would welcome anybody's input or what worked, what didn't work, any film adaptations, anything like that that's just Shakespeare related. I would love to hear people's thoughts because, like I said, I'm going into it fairly open-minded and just going to see where it goes. So.
Yeah, I'd be very curious about people's suggestions too. I mean, of course, there's no way to do it and know for sure you're doing it chronologically, but you have some good ideas. I think the Riverside Shakespeare set up in a well-educated idea of what's chronological, even though they will acknowledge, there could be some tweaks here. Right. But the problem with doing that is you start with like the Henry VI plays, and they're fun, but they are not his best by any means, and you get threatened to kind of get buried in those, and so might be good just to take whatever it is that's intriguing you at the moment and jump in.
I think so too. Yeah, it's that we talk about it often, but that whole idea of no matter who the author is, when you are starting to either dive back in or approach a new author, do you start with the best of the best, or do you kind of work your way up to the best? And with Shakespeare, there's lots of best to choose from, so that part shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, it'll be fun.
All right. Mine would be kind of similar, but not Shakespeare and not nearly as ambitious. Well, or rather, potentially, right? I don't know. But I do have the goal of more Dickens in 2022 because I really have enjoyed getting back to Dickens this last year. I talked about this recently, on our holiday reading plans of doing David Copperfield, which I'm doing. But I want to keep it going. And I didn't want to just say, read another book by Dickens. I decided I'm going to read two of his novels at least. That's my intention.
Nice.
And right now I'm thinking Bleak House, which I've owned for a long time and had the same experience where I went to get it because I'm going to read Bleak House, and then I bought it and whoa, what am I doing with this, thing in my hands? This is like a, major commitment, and I've never done it. And then on Twitter the other day, from our friend Levi Stahl, said the Pickwick Papers was brilliant, and I think Ben may have been in on that conversation too, saying it's kind of a good holiday read. Well, I'm not doing it this holiday season, or at least I don't know. Maybe I'll get there, but I'm thinking that might be a good one to plan for 2022 holidays.
Ooh,
but between now and then, something like Bleak House, probably Bleak House. Let's just be, let's be ambitious and go for it. So
you might as well. This is the time of year for optimism. So
right.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because I had kind of divided up some of my into like general sections, and under classics that I might read this year, I had a reread of Bleak House with a question mark next to it. Because my problem, or it's not a problem, there's, as much as I love Dickens, there's still a fair chunk of his stuff that I have not read at all. And so it's always that thing of, do I want to go back and revisit a favorite, or do I want to continue to explore some new things? And not to say it has to be an either or, but yeah, I may end up making this a Bleak House year myself.
Well, your reading of the opening section of The Fog that we did in that our favorite openings episode a while back definitely sparked a lot of this interest in getting back to Dickens, and so I'm looking forward to that, and could tell you have a lot of affection for the book just from that episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that makes me very happy, as you know. David Copperfield for now, and then moving on to some other stuff. I love it.
Have you read the Pickwick Papers? Is that one that's okay?
I haven't, so that's one I was going to say, like, depending on what you end up doing, maybe around next holiday season, that might be a fun one to join you. Because there are some Pickwick Papers.
I can sense a Christmas special already. Pickwick Papers.
I can too.
Okay, we can't do this. That's. But we can have that hope, right? That's what we were talking about.
No, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, that sounds great. I mean, I'll kind of carry your theme on with classics, and mine, the big one that I have, next year's Don Quixote, so to speak, the one that I've kind of been percolating about a lot is the Brothers Karamazov.
Oh, okay.
I've never read that one. It's been sitting on my shelf for years and years, and I've read a fair number of the Russians over the last 5 or 10 years, and that's just one of the big gaps that I feel like, not in any kind of like I need to do it, but just it appeals to me. It sounds great. I loved Crime and Punishment. So anyway, that's top of my classics list. I have some other ones that I would like to revisit. Middlemarch as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that just keeps coming up so often, and I loved it so much when I read it probably 5 years ago. That I think that's another one. So, all three of those are big. Bleak House, Brothers Karamazov, and Middlemarch. So that alone might be a good chunk of my year if I actually get to them all, but those all really appeal to me.
We'll have to, maybe I shouldn't ask you this. It's its own episode on big books, and you're the ones that you're like your great whales out there that you still want to,
it's
chase.
funny. If you want to talk about it now, I actually that was kind of one of my general categories that I had for 2022. So we can get to that in a minute if you want to. Did you have any? Do you want to go there now? Do you have any?
No, let's let you. Okay. Well, Bleak House. That is the last one. That is the only one that I have that's like that. But the Brothers Karamazov, going back to that just for a second, have we talked about this? I think when you sent me on my chase to buy David Copperfield, and I kind of like, Paul, do you know how big this book is? Do you have any idea?
Right.
I think I may have said, well, I'll return the favor and keep the pressure up for you to read the Brothers Karamazov, because I love that book. And it's one of these reading experiences. I was in college and in a tiny town where the only bookstore was 2 racks at a local craft store. A lot of Signet classics. I mean, other than the bookstore that was at the college itself, which was fun to go and look at still. But Signet classics, tiny paperbacks, and I remember it was like March or April, and I went and pulled off the Brothers Karamazov, and just on a whim said, okay, this is what I'm starting today. And I grabbed it and I took it home, and I remember reading like 50 pages right then and there, just enthralled, just so excited. And it was in May of that year that I went on a trip to England and took a tour, kind of on a bus all the way around. And I read that whole time and finished it somewhere there. I can't remember exactly where it was. I know I usually write where I finish books and when in the back of them, but I don't even know where my copy of that is. Anyway, really just one of those really great reading experiences where I was invested from beginning to end in the characters' lives and in their stories. So if you choose that one, it's been a long time. I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember moments and I remember feelings. I'll be very interested in getting your thoughts and kind of that happiness of maybe hopefully seeing you enjoy a book that I have enjoyed in the past.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You might hate it, but
very unlikely. Very unlikely. I mean, I really loved Crime and Punishment, and same way that you just described, where I don't remember tons of details, but it's one of those really. He's such a visceral writer, and some of the scenes or just the emotions you feel while you're reading it have really stuck with me for years. So I know what you're saying there.
Yeah. Oh, well, that'll be fun. That'll be fun. Well, I'll hope that you keep that one selfishly. But I'll understand if you do Bleak House or Middlemarch instead, and then it just, it's next year before you revisit it.
Well, we're being optimistic. So as of now, like I think I could do more than one of those for sure. I would picture Brothers Karamazov for sure, and then probably like Middlemarch or Bleak House, since they're both rereads. I could see getting to one or the other of them, maybe not all three. But.
Well, don't forget, you and I both, have the Book of Jacob.
I know,
which is its own beast of a book. But I
haven't even gotten to my big book section of this discussion yet. So.
Well, let me pull us down a little bit, and then we'll get back to these lofty, godlike ambition for the next year. So, one of my goals this year is to get back into the Brother Cadfael novels. We talked about this when I went to the bookstore and found, the kind of a treasure trove. I need to get through them now, and I need I like sometimes having a series that I'm going to pick through during the year. And I thought, oh, do I want to read one of these a month? I mean, they're short, 200 pages, tiny little paperbacks, so I can do that. Like, that's doable. It's a matter of keeping up the stamina and the enjoyment, not burning out. But I do like his book, these Ellis Peters, Brother Cadfael mysteries, the Benedictine monk, during the time of Queen Maud and all of that in British history. It's a lot of fun, and the setting's great. And so I'm thinking I might do right now one a month, and they have an order, and I'm going to do them in order. And I'm not going to start at the beginning because I don't want to reread at this point any of them. I want to keep going with the ones I haven't read yet. So that's one of my reading intentions for the year.
You said you've read some of them. Are you do you know roughly how many of them you have under your belt already?
No, I don't remember. I'll have to go back and look. I know I've read at least the first 3. I don't know if I've read 4 or 5, but I know I've read the first 3 because I remember them, and I remember their titles, and I remember the stories still.
Yeah.
But I can't quite remember 4 if I've read it or not. So that may be where I begin, just because even if I can't remember it, I probably didn't read it.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if I did.
Am I safe to assume that if you pick up on, say, book 4, that it's not necessarily something where if you don't remember every detail of plot 3, you're going to be in the weeds? Like, does it do a good job of either not requiring that or else kind of filling you in and catching you up?
I don't remember. It's been a while since I read them. I know that some characters become, characters, but I actually feel pretty comfortable in the world. Yeah. I don't know why, but I feel like she did such a good job establishing the monastery and some of the main characters, plus some of it's historical, and that I feel good. And there's always Wikipedia.
Yeah,
if I'm really starting to get lost. So I'm comfortable. And no, I don't think it's not like a series where everything in book 3 or 4, has to build on what came before. I mean, they are, I believe, and maybe it changes later on, but I believe they're all discrete mysteries.
Yeah.
He just lives at a bad time in this monastery,
Right. It's like Murder, She Wrote, like if she showed up in my town, I would leave immediately because something bad is going to happen.
Well, there would be there's the instigating incident. You'd be dead.
That's true.
And your wife would be like, he just had to leave because you were coming. Well, I think something happened. Yeah. Don't leave. I don't know what you should do.
Exactly. I don't know either, but yeah, I hopefully that'll never be an issue. Old Angela Lansbury won't be showing up on my door. No, that sounds like a lot of fun though.
Well, I'm excited about it. Again, they're fun books, and they're fun to hold. Like, they're just tiny.
Yeah, we talked about that previously, where it's nice to have something like that where you can just have it with you, keep it in your pocket and or your glove box or whatever, and just have it when you need it, waiting in line or something like that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, so what do you got next?
So we had our nature episode, however long ago that was, and I was thinking about, while planning for this episode, some other things that I might want to do in the coming year, and I always like to make sure that I'm reading some nature books. And so I was thinking, we talked about some of maybe my nature book bucket list, if we want to say that. And there's some that have been on there for a long time that I have just not gotten to. So one of them that I mentioned was John Mcphee, The Annals of the Former World, which is kind of a deep dive into the geology of the U.S. and goes into all kinds of, I think we talked about this, but he's a former, English literature professor. So he's a very good writer, but yet he delves into kind of the geology, and that sounds wonderful to me. So I'm thinking either that one, your buddy Lauren Isley, which I keep mentioning, and if I don't read him soon, you're going to just start rolling your eyes whenever I talk about it.
No, I'll just be excited for you. Yeah. You'll get there.
Yeah. Or else William Least Heat Moon, who I talked about as well, who has written that series of, I say series, but those books, Blue Highways, Prairie Earth, and River Horse, where he kind of delves into certain areas of the country. So one of those 3, like I said, I like to keep it kind of, give myself some wiggle room, but one of those 3 I would like to get to sometime in the coming year, because all 3, again, have been on my radar for a while now, and they just all three sound so wonderful to me. I keep saving them, but I think this is the year for at least one of them.
Well, and I just sent you a picture. I just got the new Rachel Carson
Oh yeah,
trio in from the Library of America, and there you go. I mean, there's another one to tempt you.
yeah, that really does tempt me a lot. Like I think I've told you, I have like a couple of tattered old copies of her books that I picked up over the years at used bookstores. But when you sent me that picture, I was like, oh, that's gorgeous. I mean, it's such a beautiful edition. All of them
Mm-hmm.
collected in one. Library of America always does such a great job. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think you'll get to that one anytime soon?
Yes. Yes, it's still in the shrink wrap,
Mm.
but I do intend to get to it. They actually sent me a PDF as well, which I have been digging into over the last couple of months. So that's why it's still in shrink wrap. I'm like, oh, I've already read the first chunk of
Mm.
this, but yes,
Hmm.
that's going to be one that I'm reading just for review purposes and for enjoyment. It's
Hmm.
very well worth it so far, and I'm assuming we'll stick there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's,
when you started to say nature writing, I'm like, oh no, I haven't been. And then I thought, wait a minute,
yeah, you have.
I'm ahead of the game here.
Yeah. It just comes so naturally to you.
Right. Well, and there's the new NYR books, In the Eye of the Wild by
Mm.
Nastasia Martin. I don't know how she would say it. That is one that you need to read, regardless of big book plans. It's short,
Yeah.
very, very short. You can get through it in a day. But yeah, don't. This is, I will insist for your own, you will, for you, Paul.
Hmm.
This is one I would insist that you read. It just is right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That one, talking about Christmas lists, or if I get some gift cards, to spend in January type of a thing, that one is at or very near the top of my list. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we've talked about it, but man, NYRB Classics always does such a good job. But that imprint, or however you want to say it, the NYR books, 2021, I mean, they just knocked it out of the park. I
Yeah.
cannot believe how many good books they came out with this year, and they seem like they're continuing on that roll. So yeah.
Yes. They they're threatening to overtake NYRB Classics itself as the books that I'm most excited to get in the mail. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been very, very happy with it. And yeah, you're right. Their 2022 slate looks fantastic. So yeah, that'll be fun to keep watching.
New ways to take our money happily.
Yes, yes. We don't want it to change. My next one that I want to talk about is short stories. I've over the past several years, I've had the goal of reading and writing about each of Alice Munro's stories, and I do need to finish that, but that's not my goal. However, it does give me a really quick chance to share some listener feedback from Jerry, and I sent you this one on. This is the one where he said, Paul and Trevor, if you're ever in Victoria, British Columbia, where I have lived for several years, I suggest spending an hour in Munro's books. This store has a strong literary connection. It was co founded by Alice Munro several decades ago, and ownership remained with her ex husband, Jim, following their divorce until just a few years before his 2016 passing. The store is architecturally stunning, and I have seen pictures of it. I can't believe I didn't bring it up in our bookstores episode, but that's why we have listeners to fill in the gaps.
Exactly.
I personally refer to it as the Temple of Reading,
Mm.
which is perfect. Finally, the store's inventory is carefully selected and includes many titles from independent publishers, including university presses. Just last week, I purchased a hardcover copy of The Murder of Professor Schlick by David Edmonds, a Princeton University Press title, and Biblioasis, NYRB Classics, and Archipelago titles are always on their shelves. So
Ooh.
thanks, Jerry, for that email. I know it's kind of buried in this episode, but thought it was a nice way for us to remember the joy of going to the bookstore and my own love of Alice Munro and the short story itself. And, maybe awkwardly now bring it to my goal of Peter Taylor. There is a great dual volume Library of America, speaking of, box set of the complete stories of Peter Taylor. And I got this when it came out. It's been a while. And I still have not read any of his stories. And that's sad. It's one of these that I need the reading resolution episode to kick it off because it's just there like, oh, someday I'll get to that. but it becomes part of the shelves. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stand out to me. And so I forget about it. And then the next time I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, that'll be fun to get to.
Right.
Well, this is hopefully a reason to get to it. And I don't have a specific goal of like, I'm not going to read them all. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a goal of once a week or once a month, but I do have the goal of pulling it off and making sure that's on my bedstand table and making sure that I am touching base with his short stories as well as others, but his in particular. I want to get to know his work better.
Yeah. I love that idea. I was going to say I don't know anything about him, and then I realized I do have a collection of his called The Old Forest and Other Stories.
Hmm.
But I don't actually really know anything about him, so I'll be very curious to hear your thoughts as you start to do that.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'll again edit out the awkward noises, but yeah, so I'll just show you. Here's the,
Ooh, that's pretty.
it's
Who's the
kind of,
publisher on that one? Oh, you said, yeah.
yeah, Library of America.
That's gorgeous.
And I wonder if they complete stories 1960, 1992, and then 1938 to 1959. So there's a lot.
Yeah.
two volumes.
Well, that's
But
another one of those authors we talk about how you can spend so much time reading books on my shelf, but I don't really know anything about him. So
yeah,
I'll be
nope.
very curious to hear what you find out and what you
I'm
think of
in
him.
the same boat to an extent. I know that I looked into it when it arrived and when it was, on the horizon of being published. And I know I've heard of Peter Taylor and I've seen his books, and I know a few of them are very well regarded as some people's favorite books. But dang it, if I can even name it right now, one of his books.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is definitely someone who maybe is at risk of being forgotten in general, but certainly by me.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds great. Well, I'll keep your theme of stories, short stories going because I think I do something similar to what you do. While I'm reading these bigger books and novels and different things, I'll have on my bedside table maybe a collection of stories and a collection of poetry, like we've talked about. So
Hmm.
I'll touch quickly on poetry. I'm going to continue from our Emily Dickinson to make my way through her poetry because I enjoyed that so much, the parts that I've read so far. I'm going to keep that going in 2022. And then as far as short stories, there's a couple of people who are on my radar, and Clarice Lispector is
Mm-hmm.
probably at the very top of my list. Um, I I have never read anything by her, and she continues to come up. You know how sometimes there's just an author that seems to kind of haunt you in a good way.
Yeah.
Like you just keep hearing about this author over and over again, and she's definitely that for me. So she is very high on my list. Maybe I'm going to just move that off my shelf, put it somewhere where I can't ignore it,
The
and just start
the
dipping
the
in.
big,
The big
thick,
one,
pink Clarice Lispector complete
exactly.
stories. Yeah.
Yep.
It's right. It was right here, kind of next to my Peter Taylor on the shelf. So
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
almost could have just swapped those out and joined you, but
Yeah.
nope, I'm committed. I'm
All right.
committed.
Yeah. No. And then the other one too is just Flannery O'Connor. I just
Hmm.
keep meaning to revisit her. She's one where, having read her, of course, in school, I have a decent familiarity with her. But again, she just keeps kind of calling to me a little bit, and it's just that time where I just need to start. Again, no set number, or I don't necessarily need to finish all of her stories this year, but it's just time for me to pull her off the shelf and spend some time with her. So those are the two collections that I kind of could picture myself, reading throughout 2022.
That sounds great. Yeah, those will both haunt you a little bit, the
Mm-hmm.
Spectre and
I know.
O'Connor.
Yeah, some light reading as usual.
Well, I do have a poetry goal that's vague. This is the most vague one that I have. It's simply a book of poetry per month. I
Ooh.
don't have any particulars in mind. I've got some that are in hand that I've not read yet that I should. But, Louise Glick came out with a book
Mm-hmm.
last year that I really want to get to. There are just some that are on that I see that I haven't picked up yet, but I want this to be a reason that I do. I want to read more poetry and make it a more regular part of my routine, not just an April, National Poetry Reading Month part of my routine.
Mm-hmm.
But
I love
that's
that.
that's about all I have for that.
No, that's a good one. I really like that idea. I was looking over because I tend to, with poetry, I sometimes go to the giant collections. I think it carries some weight. And so my eye is drawn to that on my shelf. But I have a whole stack of thin poetry books over
Hmm.
there that I kind of like your idea of, not only just having it interspersed with other stuff, but maybe I'll do something similar where I could kind of pull some of those slimmer volumes down off the shelf and try to get into a little bit of a rhythm with that. I like that idea.
Well, we talked about this in Emily Dickinson, Billy Collins' Picnic Lightning.
Yeah,
Have
no,
you read that one? I
I
think
haven't.
I would recommend it to you and to others too. I know I recommended it in that episode, but that's one of those that I pulled down off the shelf one day back when it was just out and read from cover to cover and then read it again, all in the same day, because it was just so right for that moment. And it's own thing. I'm not saying it's, Keats or Dickinson or anything like that. But it's lovely. And, with its title coming from Lolita,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of fun stuff in there. And that poem on Emily Dickinson, I think, maybe give you a little flavor of the fun and the silliness to an extent, but also the way they can take a dip all of a sudden and make you realize how serious it can be too. So that's a good one to that's fairly thin that
Yeah.
I can see you enjoying.
No, having heard you read a few of those poems over these episodes, yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I have The Art of Drowning. That I was
Mm-hmm.
doing a search to see which Billy Collins books I had, and that's the one I do have. So I don't know if you are familiar with that
Yep.
particular
Yep.
fiction. Okay. So, but yeah, no, the Picnic Lightning in particular sounds wonderful.
It's my favorite of his, for sure. But I do like The Art of Drowning a
Mm.
lot. But there's something too about the production of Picnic Lightning. It's a beautiful book. It's kind of squarish, and the cover's lovely. The Art of Drowning, I might like it better if they just published a better, edition
Yeah.
of it. So,
Yeah. It does make a difference. It does make a difference.
so
Yeah.
let's see. I've got one more that I want to bring up. Where are you at on your list?
Yeah, I can kind of tailor it as needed. I have plenty of other ones going, but I don't need to keep going on and on about it. I do.
What?
Why don't?
Go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, I'll just say I want to continue. This is not really a specific goal to 2022, but I'm always just very focused on continuing to read a lot of translated literature. Books
Mm-hmm.
from around the world. And I mean, there's just a whole pile of books
Yeah.
here that I could list. I mean, you and I have talked a little bit about The Melancholy of Resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I would still like to get to Grossman's book. Speaking of this, again, I don't even know if I'm going to get to my category of big books, but half the books I'm mentioning here are giant. But In Memory of Memory by Maria Stepanova
Yeah.
has been on
Oh,
my list.
yeah. That. So it's on my list too. Talking about beautiful books as well. That purple cover,
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's
it
gorgeous.
is beautiful. And yeah, I'm very excited to read that one. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, but Your Face Tomorrow, that trilogy from Javier
Mm-hmm.
Maria is pretty high on my list. And then
Another
I'm
big
always bad at.
one. Another big
I
one.
know it's another big one. Well, speaking of, there's that book Kin from Archipelago that was like making so much buzz maybe 3 months ago, and I mean that one's sitting over there. So I guess it's not any specific book necessarily, but just I wanted to throw it out there that I continue to just so much appreciate all these wonderful publishers that are coming out with these amazing books from around the world, and just how much that has enriched my life over the last, probably 5 to 10 years that I've really made that a
Yeah.
focus of my reading. And so it's become so natural now that I don't even really need to commit to it necessarily. But I just thought it was important to kind of acknowledge that and just say that will be a big part of my
Mm-hmm.
reading in 2022.
I am glad
And
you brought it up because I was trying to figure that out for my list. But I didn't have any particular translated literature goal. But you're right. That's just a thing. It's just a thing
Mhm.
I'm gonna keep doing. So.
Well, can I ask you, just related to that? This is something I was just thinking about. So, one thing that I've done in the past couple years, again, not any kind of formal thing, but I've just enjoyed exploring specific publishers during a given year. Like nothing prescriptive, but like 2 years ago, I got a subscription to Open Letter Books.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had kind of started to delve into their backlist a little bit and really enjoyed that. And then last year it was Charco Press, that same kind of thing. My wife got me a bundle, one of their bundles for Christmas, and they kind of got them on my radar. And I really enjoyed that last year. So looking ahead to 2022, just generally speaking, two publishers that I think I'm going to kind of dig into a little bit more is Fitzgeraldo and the Dalkey Archive, because
Mm-hmm.
Dalkey Archive has kind of gone through this revamping process with Deep Vellum. You know, there's this partnership going on, and I know that they just came out with a new website, and all kinds of exciting things are happening. And I do have probably 5 or 6 of their books, and I've read a couple of them. But I was just thinking that would be a really fun thing to do, is just kind of Fitzgeraldo and Dalkey. Just maybe this is 2022 will be the year where I start to do a little digging into their backlist and just see what I've been missing. Yeah. Do you have any publishers like that you think maybe you could see in 2022 exploring a little bit? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, putting me on the spot. I'll have to get back with you on that particular. Yeah. That might be a fun thing to go over because none are coming to mind, not because I'm unwilling or don't have any, but none are popping right up that you haven't mentioned, because Dalkey is fantastic. I had a rough spot with him over the past 5 or 6 years because of it was hard. I didn't ever know what they were publishing or when.
Yeah.
But that has changed, and it doesn't seem like their ethos has changed, though. The type of books they publish, and that's exciting because they have just a fantastic history and great backlist. And Fitzgeraldo, I mean, part of the reason the NYRP Books imprint is so good here in the U.S. is they're publishing a lot of Fitzgeraldo books. You probably have seen that several of the ones that, there's a lot of overlap between those two. And so, but if I were picking, I would say that one of the biggest surprises for me this last year was NYRP Books. And that's probably the one I'm most excited about over in 2022, as we've already talked about, but that would be my answer to that question.
No, it's a great answer.
Had we not already answered it?
Yeah, no. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot. And
no, that's okay.
I don't know that necessarily I don't know if people necessarily think of planning around a certain publisher, but I think part of the reason that I've done that is just with the subscriptions. Like I said, it kind of puts them on your radar, and you start to think of them as collective a little bit more. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a fun way to kind of think about it, a little different.
Yeah, just like there's an author behind the books, there's a publisher behind the books too, and the types of books they put out that can be just as enjoyable to get to know and fall in thrall to.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, I will give my last reading intention, and it's all about Penelope Fitzgerald. She wrote 9 novels as she got older in her later years. And her first 5 are kind of based on things in her own life, like living on a boat in the Thames or working at the BBC or, things like that, she wrote her first 5 novels about those. And I've read all of those. And then she wrote her last 4, which are kind of historical, including the big one that you hear about all the time, The Blue Flower. That's her last book. And I've read that one. But I have not read the other 3 historical ones. That is Innocence, the beginning of Spring, and The Gate of Angels. And I'm thinking this is the year to clean it off, finish her up, not because I want to be done with her, but because I want to complete my knowledge of her work and then maybe revisit things, in the future. But I've been putting it off because I don't want to never have another Penelope Fitzgerald book to read. But I need to read it, that's why they're there.
Right.
Oh, so that's great. my last goal. I know there'll be plenty of others, and you've certainly inspired me to have a few others today, but yeah, Penelope Fitzgerald as an author to complete this year.
I love that goal. She's one that I've read The Bookshop.
Oh, and I love that one.
I do too. And for some reason, I have not read any of her other stuff, even though I do own at least a couple others. I know I own The Gate of Angels and The Blue Flower.
Do you own Offshore? The one that won the Booker?
It's not coming up in my... Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It's in one. It's in a... Is it a Library of America? Oh, it's in an Everyman edition. I do have Offshore. And it's in a collection with Human Voices and The Beginning of Spring. So those 3 are collected together. Yeah, Offshore. That might be a good one. I don't know.
It's lovely. And it's short. And she... In fact, read her
while you're... A lot of hers are, right?
Yeah. Read her while you're reading Joy Williams. Offshore. There's a weirdness and just a bit of that you're never quite sure if it's meant to be funny or tragic. And I think that would be one that I would recommend, that if you never read anything else by her, read Offshore. Okay. I would have recommended The Bookshop first and foremost.
Right.
But yeah, I think you're safe going on to offshore. It took me a while. Like the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, I'm like, I don't even know what I just read.
Mm-hmm.
But then settled into it, reread them, and really, really like Offshore.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned her because what you described earlier is perfect. How sometimes a book will kind of blend into your bookshelf and your eyes kind of scan over it because you've just had it. And I think sometimes with her books, I do have a tendency to do that. I don't know if it's just because they're small and they kind of just blend in amongst the bigger ones. But I'm glad you mentioned her. I'm going to have to pull her out and maybe I'll try Offshore this year.
Well, I don't think you ever got back to your big books goal. Should we go there, or do you have a different one that you'd rather
Well,
go
no,
over?
let's go there. And again, so many of the books I've mentioned are big already.
Yeah, clearly you have that goal this year.
Right. So, Brothers Karamazov, I mean, that is the book that I will get to this year. So that's why when I mentioned some of these other big ones, these are just ones that continue to kind of call to me. I think for whatever reason, my personality, I just am drawn to some of those big collections. But one of the big ones that I would like to get to very soon is Anniversaries, which you mentioned, the big dual NYRB boxed set. I mean, I bought that the second it came out because I was so excited that they were doing it. I wanted to support them because I think they took a little bit of a risk, just doing something big
Yeah.
and different. And I wanted to make sure that I supported them, but also it just sounds so wonderful. I know that you have you read the whole thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it is everything that you said. It is towering and complicated and yet simple because you read a day by day kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very easy to dive in and get involved, and you just love the Gazina and Maria Crespal.
Mm-hmm.
You just love being with them and sympathizing with them and seeing them in their ups and downs over the year. There's that passage of time element that both of us like, marking the days, the seasons. It's awesome.
Yeah. Remind me, did you read it day by day like some people have done, or did you read it a little more quickly, or how did you approach it?
I did, well, a little bit of both. So I did read it all in one fell swoop when it came out because I was reading it for a review.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even when I reviewed it, I had not finished it, and I said it in my review. I haven't finished this yet. But it's going to be one of the best books of the year for me. But I want to let people know about it. I've read enough of it to be completely taken by it, and this is not a book that you have to finish to be in love with and get a whole bunch of stuff out of. But I did finish it at that time, when it first came out, and then I started it again, reading it day by day with the days of that
Mm-hmm.
we were on. Really enjoyed that, but also fell off the wagon and had a
Yeah,
really hard time getting back into it. That's a long time to do a book day to day.
I
It
know.
it was a tough. I wouldn't. While I would recommend that, it didn't quite work for me as well as just being able to keep on, because I didn't want to stop
I
sometimes.
know. That's my thing is I don't know, we talked about like the Levant trilogy, how a lot of times it's like 18 or 20 pages if you're in one of
Hmm.
these reading groups. And sometimes I kind of rebel against that idea because I want to just keep going. This with the Levant trilogy specifically, I've found some value. I've really enjoyed holding myself to that 18 pages a day or so. But I do think with something like Anniversaries, the way I envision myself doing it I'd be more likely not to chop it up into tiny sections and maybe I would just go with it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably its own type of accomplishment and its own experience, because yeah, it was super cool to be reading about, you know early September in New York City when it was hitting September for the
Yeah.
fall approaching, the seasons, and have that be going on outside. But I didn't succeed at doing it that way.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't
Yeah.
recommend it because it didn't work for me. But it probably,
Right.
if it had, I might even look on that as one of the best experiences ever, because it would have stuck with me a full year. But yeah,
Well, that's the
that
nice thing about something like that is it's not to say you couldn't do it again someday if you wanted to. But I
and
think,
I actually intend to try that again
yeah,
someday.
yeah. So anyway, that one I would like to, and I think I might dive into it at some point this year. And then, there's several other ones, but realistically, the other one that I would really like to get back to is Karl Ove Knausgaard, the
Hmm.
My Struggle series. I started the first one, or I mean, I finished the first one, read the second one, and then I kind of stalled out on the series, not because I wasn't enjoying them, but just I don't remember exactly, honestly, why I stopped. So they're so good and so interesting, and I just feel like this is the time. I don't want to let it turn into one of those things where I always mean to get back to them and never
Yeah.
do, and especially because I know like people have some mixed feelings about him and everything. Or like I don't want time to kind of erase the excitement that I felt about diving into that when Archipelago first came out with them, and I was just kind of new to the whole idea and really excited about it. And so my decision is whether I want to start on book 3 or whether I want to start over and work my way back through the first 2 again. But anyway, I would like to really get back to those because they're so good. I don't remember if you've read any of those or not, but
Yeah, I had the same thing as you. Read the first 2, really loved them, kind of stalled out on book 3, and then thought maybe I've already gotten the main stuff out of this, like the
mm-hmm.
process, the exceptionally detailed work. Maybe maybe I don't need to finish them to feel like I've gotten what there is to get from them.
Right.
So I don't know if I'll ever get back and finish it or not.
Yeah.
But I loved the first 2 books, the insights there, the hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's kind of like the wheel of time we talked about on our fantasy
I
episode. You
know.
kind of stall out, the excitement starts to fade, and yeah, maybe you owe it to yourself to get back to that route and see how it pans out, rather
Yeah,
than
exactly.
get discouraged by it being fairly long again and
Mm-hmm.
tedious at times.
Yeah.
But
I've heard that it goes interesting directions as you get further into the series and especially
mhm.
towards the end. And so it does intrigue me. But anyway, so those are a couple that are just on my list. But as we go throughout the year, I can touch on some of these other ones that may or may not spring up because there's always plenty. That again, that's kind of the excitement though. I like having way more books on there than I ever will realistically get to. That's kind of the fun of it. So
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. All right. We started this podcast thinking we'd do about a half hour. We've never succeeded at that, and we're only getting longer winded.
mm-hmm.
But I'm enjoying it. I'm not saying that as anything. I hope listeners are as well. I I'm gonna let my recommendation stand on my maybe reading intentions and recommend people check out some of that stuff. But did you have a recommendation that you want to give before we end the episode?
I mean, I'll keep it very quick. There's this book called Here, Here, by Richard McGuire. It's a graphic novel. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've heard of that one, but
Mm-mm.
it's fascinating. Apparently it originated as a 36 panel story that was published in 1989 in a magazine called Raw. It's a comics journal. So I guess at the time it was this huge buzz in the comic world, and enough so that over time it has been adapted. This is a 304-page book, and it's described as interconnected, overlapping storylines. So it's just fascinating. We talk a lot about time on this podcast, and this is one of the coolest examples of time that I've ever seen. So it basically takes place all in one room or
Huh.
in one space. And so I'm showing Trevor here, there's some pictures of, the artwork. It's almost like a photorealistic type of artwork, and it will show it'll show this room over time. But the
Huh.
interesting thing about it is it will show it in the 1950s, and then it'll show it in 1951, 1952. All of a sudden, you will notice in the bottom right hand corner, there's like this cutout, and it'll say 1750, and it'll show a fox running across. But
Hmm.
that's within the picture of the 1950s, like Leave It to Beaver living room. And what you start to realize is it's showing this one specific spot in the world over the course of time, and it jumps around. It's not in any linear time. But the really cool thing is like, so they'll show like, again, I'm showing Trevor, but you'll see like sometimes as it gets further on one page, there'll be 4 or 5 interposed snippets of time all appearing on the same page. And so you're seeing like a Native American person who is taking a bath in a lake right on the spot where later on this is somebody's living room. And then there's even these really interesting things where suddenly it'll show a dinosaur walking past, or it'll just show like this time billions of years ago where it was not even like it's just gas. So anyway, I don't know. It's there's no narrative really to it. I mean, you can start to piece together little bits of narrative if you pay close attention. But for me, it's not about that. It's more about this really fascinating idea of wherever you are at a given time, there's this deep time history that spreads clear back. So anyway, it's called Here by Richard McGuire. I don't know if I've done a very good job of describing it, but I got it from the library and have just been fascinated. I've gone through it. I've read it now several different times, and I recommended it to a friend at work. My wife's read it. All of us have just really found it super fascinating. So I would just recommend somebody look it up and see if it appeals to you. But
Yeah,
I
that
really
does
like it.
look great. And the thing that's kind of nice about that, those pictures were lovely. Like again, that threatens to wear itself out pretty quick as a concept, something to
Yeah.
explore. But those were surprising and delightful to look at. Yeah, showing me some more. I have to check this one out too. That is really intriguing. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah. And like a lot of graphic novels, if you want to, you could probably read it in 30, 45 minutes, or you could spend a good part of a day just really exploring the artwork. So yeah, I don't read a ton of graphic novels, but every once in a while, one will come across my radar that the ones I do read, I tend to really enjoy them. And this is very high on my list. So anyway,
Cool.
yeah.
Oh, thanks for that recommendation. I'm glad we didn't
course.
skip yours. So, all right. Well, Paul, once again, nice to be with you. Happy New Year. I can't wait to keep on doing this in 2022. I'm excited for our plans. I'm excited for the serendipity of the reading year and to see where we get. I just excited about the future. So
me too. I can't wait to find out where we're going to go next. And thanks everybody for listening. We're looking forward to 2022. This has been a blast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mooks and the Gripes podcast. You can follow the Mooks and the Gripes and get show notes and book and film reviews at mooksandgripes.com. On Twitter, you can follow Trevor at Mooks and Paul at BiblioPaul. You can also get information about future shows on our Patreon. If you'd like to donate to the show, anything and everything, even $1 a month helps and is deeply appreciated. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/mooks. Until next time.